All right, Joseph Green, here we are. We've talked about this a few times, and I am stoked to have you come and meet my audience and them to meet you through the magic of podcasting and YouTube channel stuff. So we've known each other a bit. Folks that are listening won't know you, so I'd love for you to introduce yourself if that's a cool way for you to start. I dig that.
Hello, people who don't know me yet. My name is Joseph Green, and I would like you to see me as a father, as a partner, as a artistic activist, as a narrative disruptor, and as someone who believes in the power of story to make the world a better place.
That's a great way to start, and I've heard this over and over again, and I just love to get some lessons on this. You say often people will say, "I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I want you to see me as." And I know you're a wordsmith guy, right? So I've tried to get comfortable with that in my own language, and I'd love some thoughts on that, on why it is you do that and what that sets up.
Yeah. So at their very core or their very essence, words are symbols that mean something. And in this world, especially now, in this world currently, it seems as if depending on what silo you're in, words mean different things. And when we talk about disrupting stigma, especially as it pertains to people who are in recovery or people who are in active use or just anything that has to do with substances. A lot of times, because of how we've been fed the images through media and wherever else you find these things, through the language that your parents use, through the way that your teachers spoke about it, or whatever it may be. When I say person in recovery, I don't know what you see, right? And while I and a bunch of people who I've sat in circles with find great honor and pride in that title, I think sometimes it is important to reconfigure, restabilize, or restate in public so that when I say or get to that part of, and I'm also a person in long-term recovery, if that's something I choose to say in a particular time, all of those things that I said before are that, right? And are because of that. And so it also opens a space when I'm doing a presentation and I don't get to immediately have this moment where we're going back and forth. It gives me the beginnings of the unraveling of the infinite person that I am. You know, I contain multitudes. So which one of these things that I spoke of am I going to, then elaborate on as we have this conversation, as opposed to, you know, I do this. So I was just with a group of social workers. We were doing a storytelling workshop. And I said, social worker doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Someone says social worker, you think hero, we're in the trenches. And then you say social worker in a room full of people, and someone in there has had a family broken apart and they blame a social worker, right? So what is it that you actually do at your essence, right? And it's like, I fight for people. I believe in growing people as a community. I believe in investing in families. I believe, whatever it is that you believe in, transcends the title that you have. And so I play around with it. It's not a perfect art where I'm like, this is how it works and this is how you should do it. Sometimes I'm a little more abstract and sometimes I'm a little more concrete. It depends on the mood and the audience, actually. So with your audience of people who didn't know me very well, I think I use a lot more concrete terms to express what's important to me.
Yeah. Well, and so our paths cross in a few wonderful and odd and synchronistic ways, and here we are. So I do happen to know too that not to put words in your mouth, but this idea that that we're both in long-term recovery has a meaning, and if you're open to exploring that a little bit, I'd love to know what long-term recovery means to you. Because I always take my story with me. I always remember where I was when these words would pop up and how I felt when I was on the other side of the line where I got, in my case, to sobriety. And that would have been a charged word. In fact, that was a charged word for about 2 years in. So I think it's worthwhile, particularly if somebody snuck in here to listen to this and they're grappling with some of these words. It might be worthwhile to bat that one around a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't
Okay.
mind. I tell you, it does make me nervous. Uh, it makes me nervous not because, well, if this were a few years ago, it would make me nervous because as somebody who is present in and employed in many different spaces within the recovery community, I know that there are folks in our space who take their definition of the word recovery very seriously, as if it were the only definition of the word recovery. And I would be concerned about being, but I guess the popular term now is canceled, right? But I'm past that in my own personal development as a person and as a person in recovery. And so when I say I'm nervous about it now, what makes me nervous about that question is that person who is listening and is like on the brink of needing to be completely without substance, right? And knowing that that step is something that's going to save their lives, or someone who has taken that step is on the other side of making that decision and is unsure because there's a long period of, I think after 30 years, there's still some people who have moments, right? No matter how long, it's like, you know, was I tripping? Like on the other side, is it okay? Can I go back to that space? Was it because what I'm feeling right now is too heavy or too hard or whatever it may be? So I'm nervous because I know that our words affect people. And depending on how the disease is living inside of you, I could say something innocuous, something that was innocent, and someone could hold on to that and be like, actually, well, Joseph said, this is what recovery is. And like what I'm doing right now is way too hard. So I'm going to try that to see. So that's why I just want to preface that this thought, this conversation, this idea is not something that I take very lightly. I don't share a sobriety date when I talk about recovery because I was seeking healing before I found sobriety, and I count that as part of recovery. I know people who are smoking marijuana so that they can stay away from meth. I consider them in recovery because they're seeking healing. And I know people who, if they have another drop of alcohol, are going to put themselves into a binge and into a hospital and maybe even to a casket. And they are also in recovery, right? And so um, for me, being in long-term recovery means you are seeking with the entirety or as much of your being as you can muster to live a healthy life where you add value to your community, to the world around you, and to yourself. Now, what does that look like to you? Right? What does that have to be? For me, there are certain things that I can't do to be that healthy, active person. It's different for me than it is for you. And I think that is something that is really important for people and people who design programs to understand. Um, so yeah, and I don't know how roundabout that was, but it's not intentionally vague. I think it's intentionally open to interpretation.
Well, I love it. If I had a nickel for every time I said at a meeting, words get in the way.
Yeah,
And you just pointed out they also are incredible delivery mechanisms as well, right? But I think words got in the way for a long time for me, and
yeah,
words got in the way once I got sober, right? And so it's an ongoing thing, and so I do like asking that because, and I do like that it was vague. That's I've asked that question 100 times, man. That was a fun exploration right there.
Well, I will also say it's a really, I work with a lot of young people, and the word sobriety is like Voldemort to them, right? Like you hear that when there's like, no, I don't want any part of that, right? Many people need to reform their relationship to substances. But if the only thing that's on the other side of that reformation is not doing any substances, as you said, that word can get in the way. Maybe that is where they need to be, right? Maybe that is, but you're not going to get them to be a part of the conversation if you start off with language that confines, right? Language that takes away or speaks in the negative or speaks of the negative, right? You want to draw people to health by abundance. This is what's over here for you. This is what's waiting for you. Look at what you'll have when you come to this space. So like even in the introduction, like father, activist, storyteller, all of these things because I'm a person in long-term recovery, right? I can sustain them. I can keep them. I get to be those things. If you would have asked me what I was when it all fell apart, as it were, at the height of active use, I was aspiring maybe to hopefully one day be some of those things. I can't take away being a son from my mother, but I definitely didn't feel like a son to my mother, if that makes sense. So I wanted those things. I wanted to have those things. And that is what sort of pulled me into my first room, if you will, wanted to be better at those things before I lost them completely or a chance of having them completely.
Well, I know a couple more things about you. I'd love to
Yeah,
pull a
that's going.
string. Let's pull a string to something here. So I happen to know that you're a spoken word artist, right? And I happen to know that you do a lot of presenting. To reiterate, language is a big part of your life. And in our previous setups for this call that we're having together here, we've talked about being artists. And so I'd love to, you can take it wherever you want. I am curious if that thread of being a spoken word artist continued through when you define yourself as getting into recovery. Has it always been there? Did it ever couple with your substances? And was there ever problematic disconnecting from that? Does that
Oh,
make sense?
right. Yeah, yeah, it makes perfect sense. So being out in front of people is a part of my identity that I can trace back to like preschool. And I don't remember the presentation. I was told I was dressed as a duck, but I was told that story so much and it brought my family so much joy. I think like many young people, like I first found my first passion in things that made my parents happy. Right. And not in like a twisted or weird way. It was just like, oh, I did this thing. And like, oh, it makes the person who I love more than anyone happy. I want to associate that with who I am. And so I sought chances to be in front of people. And I don't think I ever really thought about it until I got to like middle school and high school. And I started to develop, and I didn't know this is what I was developing, but I started to develop or succumb to extreme anxiety. And if you knew me back then, this would might come as a shock to you because it's not something that I wore out on my sleeve. Uh, I kept pushing myself into performance space. I was a theater kid. I did speech and debate. I ran for public office or school office. I did all of these things because it was an identity that I held, but it was in conflict with what my body was telling me. So when I made it to college, I hadn't I hadn't drank or smoked. I'd done no substances up until I was the second semester of my college year, my freshman year, and I remember seeing professors smoke weed at parties and obviously drinking is a big part of many college campuses. And I remember when I finally started drinking, how you hear this story a lot, right? And it's really sad because a lot of times it happens when people are very young. I took a sip from my parents' liquor cabinet and the buzzing stopped, right? Like, hold on, this is what people feel like. This is like, so all those people who just like glide through existence, being able to ask for what they want, and they know what to say to the girl, and they know how to, prepare for the audition without throwing up before, like these people, this. And so I think really early on in my professional artistic or college career, I started to associate drinking and doing drugs with part of my ritual to be an artist. Before I had words for anxiety, before I had words for depression, before I had words for disorder or trauma or whatever, I had medicine. And I didn't have to ask anybody about it. And I didn't have to tell anyone what hurt to get it. In fact, I was celebrated. The more I did, the more I acted out, the more I saw social acceptance. So when it came time to walk away, I also had to walk away from art. I didn't see it coming. I honestly thought it'd be something that I was going to be able to hold on to. Like, I'm going to be able to do art in my early recovery as a way to stay on the straight and narrow. But then my art was so intertwined with performing, and I couldn't get on a stage, barely have a conversation. So it took me maybe a year and a half. And it was a friend who passed away, and a poem that I wrote for that person, and an open mic in DC, Northern Virginia. And a reconfiguration, a new understanding, an altered perception of what my purpose with art was. I was at a point where I was no longer expecting to be a young, famous artist. And so if art was still going to have a place in my life, it was going to have to find a different room to live in, I guess. And in this room, I go in when I have a reason to, when I have purpose to. I turn to my art when I need to create something for somebody I care about. I turn to my art when there's a cause that really matters to me, and I want to share about that cause in a way that I think is going to be really effective to whoever's listening. Um, I go for my own mental health. Um, but a lot of my personal relationship with art is as a tool to affect change. And so I really feel much better and actually am much more successful as an artist than I was beforehand, when it was more about the glorifying of me and the obtaining of some, twisted fantasy of what stardom or fame or whatever that looked like, when I was a much younger man.
Yeah.
There you
Wow,
go.
as these things tend to go, man, you just told part of my story. And that's the thing about being around people in recovery, especially in this case, we're, two people that, you can see the guitars in the background. I've got a connection to music, and, my art ran right through that, or vice versa, I should say. And so the way you just frame that up is really, really cool and interesting. In a different room, has to be in a different room. I like that. Different manifestation, because it took me a long time to find my way back to it as well, or maybe it's to find its way back to me. I'm not sure how that goes.
Well, my house got bigger, right? I had a son. I was active in my family again. I was working with young people. Uh, you know, in my early 20s, I was just in a room of spoken word artists, first actor, then spoken word artist. Like, that was the room, and it traveled with me wherever I went. And yeah, I think the more complex my understanding of who I was became, the less important it became to be the only thing that was in my life, right? Like if you meet 22-year-old, 25, 26, 27-year-old Joseph, this is heresy. It's just the art. It's just the art. um, and I don't know how many things I left broken in my wake for just the art. But I look at it and I'm like, I think of, if you watch the Michael Jordan thing on Netflix
Series, yeah,
recently. Yeah.
yeah.
I look at someone who is that accomplished at a thing, right? And you can't take any of it from him. You never could, right? I mean, it's been 15, I don't know how many years since he's been in, and he's still, no one's taking him out of the conversation with the top three for the next 50 years. Um, but it's lonely at the top.
Yeah.
I looked at the interview of him looking at his friends or associates talking about him while he was reading this iPad, because there's certain people that he can't even be in the same room with because of their relationship. And so I don't make this with a judgment. I make it as I tried to be that singularly minded about something, and I'm not built that way. So, yeah,
Well, I'm gonna jump back to something you said a few minutes ago.
please do.
Um, so I think I heard you talk about anxiety, and not having a word for it back then, right? And then having a word for it. And I think I heard you say that you found that alcohol was a medicine, or something to calm that down or whatever, which I can totally relate to. And you know what? That's typical. Like co-occurring conditions are often what people like me and you, sounds like, find substances useful for until they're no good. So fast forward to today, Joseph, how's your anxiety now? And how do you think about mental health and not having, I like to use the Gollum term of the precious, not having the precious anymore. Uh, Anything in there that you'd be willing to explore?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to I don't like to share my sobriety date. Uh, I'm still on drugs. I take a pill. I take 3 pills every day. One of them for my anxiety. Uh, and I am not ashamed of that. I don't run from telling people about it. Actually, I run to tell people about it because this is the program that is working for me. I I don't want people to punish themselves for needing help, right? And that's where I was at the beginning, like because the shame was there, right? And the societal pressure to, just drop it all. I don't think I'm this far into recovery without medication, right? And so who am I to say someone on, MAT is like, so am I, right? Just not the same thing. And so add that to what you know, I have a very busy life. I try to be healthy, but in the same way that like recovery is a journey, a practice, so is being healthy. And so nowadays I'm more than not also getting up there in years. And so like what my young body could recover from quickly, my old body reminds me of every 15 minutes. And so the anxiety is all, and it seems like for someone who may have just jumped in or is like, where is he going with this? The anxiety is wrapped in every fiber of my being, right? If my body is unhealthy, my mind is unhealthy because my mind is my body, right? And that it took a long time for me to understand that. And so just taking a pill is not enough, right? You actually have to get up and move around. You actually have to address the areas in your life where there's high stress and tension. You actually have to put people in your life that like care for you and will tell you when you need to sit down, and will listen to you when you need to talk. You need to have a therapist. I need to get another therapist. Like when I do have one, it is is a part of the tripod, right? So yeah, it's a journey. It will be a journey, I imagine, for the rest of my life. But at this moment, I can say with 100% certainty that I almost never do something based off of anxiety. Right. And I think that is a monumental term. Like if speaking of former Joseph, if I were to tell 27-year-old Joseph that he could live in a world where he could make decisions based off of what he wanted, what was good for him, what brought him joy, as opposed to what he felt pressured to do, what he felt he had to overcome because society told him as a man he shouldn't be scared of those things. Like if I could have told him that, what a gift that would be. Which is also why like I'm here, right? Like I'm not here like, well, if 0 people hear this, I will say this was a great hour spent having a wonderful conversation. But ultimately, I hope people do hear this. I hope the 23, 1, 18, 15-year-old version of somebody hears this and asks themselves a question. Is there a better way than the path that I'm taking if this doesn't feel right? So I find value in that. Speaking of like giving back to the world and the community.
I love it. There's so many things. So I'm just going to point out that one of the things that I know you from is a documentary called Tipping the Pain Scale, which I can wholeheartedly endorse and encourage people to see. And one of the things that I see in that documentary with you, Joseph, and you alluded to a little bit ago, and just now again, is I think it's safe to say your interest in and your interfacing with younger people. Because in that documentary, you're in front of a group of younger people. Um, I don't get the opportunity to be there much. Can you bring stories from tell me what that world is like? You alluded to a couple things. Anything you got on that, I'd be super curious on.
It's funny you say that. So I had a tipping the pain scale, uh, Twilight Zone moment or full circle moment. Twilight Zone seems maybe a little negative kind of like a full circle moment this morning. So part of what I do right now is I help run a production studio, and we're working on a documentary about a local neighborhood in DC called Berry Farms. And so yesterday we were at a church in that neighborhood recording some interviews with a few older citizens that were alive in the 40s and 50s in DC. We took that footage to a high school in DC and showed it to some students and recorded their responses to it, right? And all that's going to be part of this project that we've been hired to do. And Jeff Riley, the director of Tipping the Pain Scale, texted me in the middle of this. Like I'm holding my camera, I'm looking at students, and I'm having a flashback to when I was being filmed by Jeff in a classroom. And it's about something completely random. And I was like, dude, it is no coincidence that the universe has put you through to me right now in this moment. And it felt really good to respond to him. I took a quick video where I was and sent to him, and it was like, yo, you're a part of this. So to go back to your original question, it is, there is no way to build a successful society without continuous conversation and building of community and networking between the generations of humans that exist in that society. And so that's a really that's a realization that I came to after doing this work. It's not like I understood that and went into it. I got back from living in New York. I was living with my parents at like 28, 29. I was working at a Gold's Gym, making the smoothies, trying to figure out what my life in recovery was going to look like. And I got a phone call from a former teacher of mine. She was really young when I was in high school. I think it was her first year of teaching, and she coached my speech and debate team. And she was like, hey, if you're in town, I need help with our speech and debate team. Would you, want to come and, listen to some kids, give their presentations? And she hired me as a coach. Right. And like, keep in mind, this is maybe 6 months after I was rejected from a job for failing a drug test. Right. And so like, which would have been working with young people also. And like the idea that I had this opportunity, that incident in New York wasn't something that became a criminal record. And I still had an opportunity like to find this purpose in life. And I went in and I started working with these young people. And, you know, it reminded me of who I was, because whatever character I had on, for version of myself I was trying to walk confidently inside of me was a 150-pound, 6'1", 12th grader who graduated high school. You know, a stiff wind could have blown me over. And I was the drama kid who tried to play football because he thought his dad would like it. You know, still got made fun of for being like see-through, basically, how thin I was. You know, to work with these young kids, it's like 4 or 5 young people, but like they're on the fringe also. And I didn't have a me, and for them to have a me, and for me to see myself reflected in them, uh, it was the beginning of my understanding of how important it is for us to go back and to give back. And I think so many people run from their childhood, not because they had awful childhoods, but because the way society sets up adult as this like all having, all knowing, all doing whatever we want space. And so to be able to go back to young people and to be in community with them, and to realize that I'm getting as much out of this as I'm probably getting more out of this, you know, because not only am I getting something, but I'm able to like, I have power and privilege to like flip this feeling and experience into telling stories to other people about this and getting more people to participate and building bigger programs. And from that, it went from being, you know, this coach to 4 or 5 young people to starting an after school creative writing program nonprofit that was serving 30 schools at its height, and held the largest youth poetry slam on the East Coast 5 years in a row, and did performances at the Kennedy Center, may it rest in peace, and all of the other things that we were able to do, um, because of that feeling, right? And knowing, and one of the things I got out of being in recovery is like, if you got a good feeling and it creates and doesn't destroy, go. Like, go to that space and serve that and let that be your purpose. And so it hasn't always been easy. I've definitely learned a lot of lessons. I've done harm in this space, but I think also part of being in recovery is realizing that you've never done anything perfect. It's not a reason to stop, right? And so I think that I have been able to learn from it and grow from it and share and do professional developments with teachers and travel the country and give keynotes and help organizations develop curriculum. And it all spurred from a humbleness that I first cursed having, but am now eternally grateful for. So yeah, I don't work with youth as directly as I used to. I think part of that is just like I have my own kids now, and that's, you know, its own situation. But in that situation, like a bad thing, but like it's hard to give 150% to a bunch of young people and also have 2 at home waiting for you. So I've had to find a new balance. But part of that balance is creating things for other people to do work in those spaces. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I love it. Um, let's just walk right into that one a little bit. So, I love one of the things that I'm kind of insistent on is with my. I don't have any kids, but I've got nieces and nephews,
Mhm.
and I now that I've gotten over my shame and stigma of my own, and I'm recovering out loud, which I think is an awesome collection of words. You know, I'm very transparent with them, and I don't lie about it either. I don't like I tell the truth whenever I'm asked. I'm curious, how is I don't know how old your kids are, but how are those conversations in your house?
So my children are 11 and 5.
Okay.
Last year, I published a graphic novel about my recovery. my 11-year-old loves graphic novels. So there was that he was probably 3 when I started working on it. So it wasn't like I'm going to do this because, but I knew that if I would publish this thing, it was going to get in front of him, which in our household was not a surprise because it is something that we talk about as often as is necessary, right? Like it's not something that I arbitrarily bring into a space like, son, listen down, let me tell you stories about when daddy did drugs. But I see behaviors in him that remind me of myself. And I try my best to make space for that and to try to explain what I see and to offer him. So for example, I I practice Buddhism, and part of that is chanting. And my youngest son's biological mother, which is not my wife, also, and my wife actually also, but we would chant. I would chant in the morning, and my son would come, and 3-year-old, he's curious, what is going on? What is this thing that you're doing? Anything that you're not paying attention to me? So what is this? And he would sit with me, and maybe for 2 minutes or less or whatever before he started playing with the stuff, and the Gohanzen and like, knocking things over. But I could tell like there was some vibration that he was catching that meant something to him. And so that was the beginning of us trying to give him practices that we didn't have. So just breathe through it. He's wilding out. Sit down. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to finish anything right now. Finish what are you feeling? I need you to use your words to tell me what you're feeling. It's okay what you're feeling. Here's a pen, here's a pencil, here's a piece of paper. Go express all the time, every day, whenever you need to. Um, I think there's this misconception that when we meet our children where they are, that we're somehow making them softer. Um, I see my son now, he's 11. He's a pandemic kid. He has 2 households. He has gone to 4 different schools. He'll be starting this. He's in the 6th grade right now. So he'll be going to 7. He's 4 different schools, 4 different elementary schools. He has like, because both of his parents are married, he has like 12 grandparents. Um, uh, he got bullied out of a school because his mother is married to a woman, and that was something that was used to hurt him in that space. And he is one of the most talented, most charming, most emotionally mature. And this is not me like my son. It's like I'm in awe of this human, and I know that he is that way because of what we've poured into him. And so when people say, do you talk to your kid about addiction? Yeah, but not in the way that you think, right? I do tell him about the things that I did and some of the mistakes that I made and some of the love I wish I had received. Um, but it's not an empty story of harm. It's, here are keys to living a better life that were torn from these decisions and choices, and sometimes traumas that I had no choice in. And I know the life is not going to be easy for you, but like, if you can remain graceful and choose joy in the midst of the inevitable storm, even if you do fall into addiction one day, you have everything you need to fall out of it. And so that's what we talk about.
I love it. Well, we're aiming towards the end of this. So
Sorry, that gets me a little.
what? Got a little emotional? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, dude's 7. I mean, sorry, he's going into 7th grade. It's just like, they are an incredible, incredible person. And,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, cool. I'm good.
Yeah. 7th grade was a tough year for me. Right on. So I'd love to start to head toward the exit here. And one of the things that I always like to give, you the opportunity. Is there anything you'd like to share with people in terms of where they can find more of your stuff? That kind of that
Yeah,
stuff.
if you're listening to this and something I said has tickled your fancy, I have a website. The letters LMS, as in Larry Mary Sam, voice.com. I'm sure wherever you're viewing this, there'll be a link to that. Um, there's all my social media is on the page. Come check out what we're doing, the work that we're doing. And all of the poems and things that I do are on my YouTube page. So they're free to view, and hopefully you share them. And if there's anything that you think that you want to talk to me about, I'm real easy to find.
Yeah. And that might be the end, but what I'd love to offer you, if you're up for it, is to do a spoken word thing for this audience. You up for that, or is that a bridge too far?
No, no. It's not a bridge too far. Do because I have not stretched my wings in a few months now, which typically happens at the end of the year to the beginning of the year. And I've been doing a lot more storytelling than poetry, but uh, I'll never forget this poem. So just a little context. I referred to this poem earlier when a friend of mine passed away, uh, and early and long in my recovery, and I went to their funeral in New York. And after the funeral, everyone was going to go back to the bar that I used to work at, and where the height of my addiction laid its reared its head. And I knew enough about myself at that point that if I went back to the bar, I was going to have a drink, and I would excuse that drink because in the memory, right? And then that drink would end up being a line and a line and a line and a line, right? When I tell this story to young people, I say sometimes we feel losses that create holes that can't be filled in. But if you try to fill it in with something that hurts you, there's a chance that you're going to fall into that hole yourself. I had heard enough stories of people who had been off of substances for year, month, whatever. They went back because something bad happened. They tried to, and you don't make it out of that situation. So I decided to go back to my hotel room, and that's where I wrote the first draft of this poem. And when I say to people that poetry saved my life, there's the figurative, and then this is the literal. The last time I saw you alive, I wish I would have talked ugly to you. Said, put the straw down. No, I don't want to take another line. I should be writing them. My friend, you are a composer of music and magic. Instruct your limbs to serve a purpose greater than self-indulgence. Do not be fooled into thinking your pain has sharper teeth than anyone else's. I had a chance, but said nothing because I was high. This is how I got started. A bottle of Jack and a mirror. Memories in scissors, dreams drenched in ether, sliced by razors, potential roll like $20 bills, numbing the feeling on the tip of my tongue that I, or this tongue, should be serving a greater purpose. In the last-ditch attempt at self-assessment, I decided to look at my life through the eyes of loved ones, for they see everything, especially the ugly. From years of drug use, from lying with to lying to angels, friends I had forsaken, taking so much more than I had given. I had streamlined self-centeredness into a science. But there was a righteousness there. a willingness to craft this illness through alchemy and poetry into a seer stone. But honestly, how could I speak ugly to you when I was yet to speak it to myself? In these nightmares of hindsight, there is no poetry, no alliterations to soften the blow. Some realities have no simile. Truth is like truth. How could I form my lips to call your suicide a tragedy when I left you alone in that room? Kept company by narcotics and 1,000 ghosts draped in your disappointments. I can only imagine all the voices you heard, all but mine. Smear makeup onto disgust if you must. Trust the truth is seldom pretty, but she is always beautiful. It is in times like these that I need you to please talk ugly to me. My pain needs it. Too many times we caress sadness when it needs to be shaken, torn from its place of comfort, forced to grow wings to survive. Don't just tell me I can grow up and be whatever I want. Tell me that whatever I want better be something I'm willing to achieve, that dreams will dissipate under the weight of addiction, and that there is a distinct difference between living like a rock star and actually being one. Sometimes, no matter how many poems you've written, you will feel like nothing more than a cokehead and a poser. Fear not. We are all divinely flawed individuals, perfectly ugly. There's no point hiding behind pretty lies. We are the sum of the scars that hold together the remainder of our pretty pieces. The last time I saw you alive, I wish I would have talked ugly to you. It would have been the most beautiful thing I never said. There you go.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for your friendship, Joseph.
Yeah. It's always nice to be in company with people who feel in a similar way. You don't need to explain a lot. So that's good.
Take care, man. Till next
Take
time.
care.
All right.
Till next time.